In first century culture in the Roman Empire in Ephesus, the Christian household, as we've seen in chapter 5 and now the beginning of chapter 6, it involved husbands and wives, it involves parents and children, and then we hear about masters and slaves. And for us, 2,000 years later, it can be difficult to think about slavery being a part of culture, slaves being addressed in the Bible, rather than slavery just being strongly condemned. But it's important to understand that, as Paul wrote elsewhere in Galatians, that in Christ there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, that even the boundary lines that separate people socioeconomically, ethnically, none of that matters in Christ, because in Christ we are part of God's family. And it's part of why the church grew so rapidly in the first century, is because of the respect and the dignity that the Christian faith gave to women, to children, and to slaves. And so today, and then the final piece on the Christian household in Ephesians is verses 5 through 9, talking about the relationship of masters and slaves. And our verse for today is verse 7, which is directed towards slaves, but I think applies to all of us. And it is, render service with enthusiasm, as to the Lord, and not to men and women. And render service with enthusiasm, I think that's something that all of us as Christians can hear and can seek to do. We want to render service to our Master, to Jesus and to God, and we want to serve God enthusiastically. When it comes to masters and slaves, while Ephesians 6, 5 through 9 is not advocating for all slaves to be freed, it is advocating for masters to treat their slaves very, very well. And it says in verse 9, stop threatening them, for you know that you both, or both of you, have the same master in heaven, and with him there is no partiality. So even though there was obviously a hierarchical relationship between masters and slaves in that culture at this time, those Christian masters are being exhorted to treat their slaves well and to treat them without violence, without even the threat of violence. And slaves are also being encouraged to be subject to their masters and to serve them with enthusiasm. And again, this all goes back to chapter 5, verse 21, about be subject to one another out of reverence for Christ, that in all our relationships we are called to do what we can to serve, honor, bless, encourage, and care for the people in our circles of influence, whether that's a spouse if we have one, children if we have them, or people we work with or work for, or who work under us or with us. The same principle applies. We are to treat one another as Christ has treated us and how we would like to be treated.